Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Mollie Carmichael with Zonda's Inspirational Leadership Series, joined by the industry's best in all things real estate. These leaders are literally designing our future for many generations to come with new communities, home designs, technology, retail centers, infrastructure, and so much more. This series is about who they are, how they got started, who inspired them, and their journey to the top. So let's get started. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are joined by John Martin. As Jeff Myers describes John, he is a legend in our industry, and he is truly a legend in our industry. John is another great leader with humble beginnings that really worked hard to find success. Sincerely, he's well known for speaking throughout the country. He's won just about every home building award I can think of that exists in our industry. I couldn't even list them all. That could be an entire series by itself. So buckle up, get ready. This is a longer than normal interview, but it is a long legacy to share. It's worth it. And there's so much to learn from John. Stick with us through the entire thing. And if you like to learn like I do, you'll enjoy this particular podcast. It's a great series of work and lessons learned to share. So please join me in welcoming John Martin. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I am here with the great and very legendary John Martin. I've known John for many years of my career, and so have many of you. Many of you have worked with John either as a developer, as a builder. He's been a consultant, very involved in ULI, and has worked all over the country. And we're going to talk to him about his career, all the things he's done, all the amazing people that he's actually worked with, some of the inspirational parts of not only John's career, but even some of the many notorious people that he's worked with. So John, thank you, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is such a pleasure to be with you, I can't even tell you.
My pleasure.
So I'm gonna start out with, as you look back at all of the positions you've held, the companies you worked with, if you were to give yourself a title for the history of your career, what would you say your title is?
Well, as I look back over 60 years, I kind of keyed off one of my accomplishments I felt was going out to Newhall Land and repositioning that community there. What that brought me to was thinking that maybe my title was be a strategic planner and a community creator.
I like that.
And the strategic, I use the word strategic because I was looking into the future as well as just dealing with the day-to-day tactical problems of being in a recession and how do you extricate yourself from that and then move forward to invent the future with vision and creativity, I would say. So I just feel strategic planner looking forward and a community creator, which was a big umbrella, you know, that would incorporate diversified housing programs and planned communities. And so that's what I came up with.
So I'm gonna go with futurist, planner, and creator. And creator is a pretty good title.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Well, let's look back. Again, you've been a builder, a developer, and you've worked with so many different builders and developers throughout the country. High level, what companies have you worked with, and tell us your roles with all those companies throughout your career?
Well, I started in sales on a project built by John Lusk. So my first, I would say, boss or my first company would have been the Lusk & Son developers, and particularly with John Lusk. From there, I took the initiative when I was a salesperson to go beyond my job description and create a consumer study that nobody had asked me to do. As a result of that, I was recruited away from Lusk after I had gone from being a salesperson to a general sales manager to a marketing executive with an emphasis on research.
I love that you did the crossover from sales to marketing.
Well, early on in my career, I found that I really wasn't that well suited to be a salesperson, you know, dealing with objections to my product that I was selling, that I was really more of a marketing-oriented person who was trying to figure out what people wanted first in their houses, in their community, and then designing it to it. And then you wouldn't have to come up with dealing with objections to your product. So
Totally. That makes sense.
So I was recruited away by Sandy Goodkin, who was one of the original market research and consumer research companies in our business way back when.
Definitely one of the greats.
Yeah, that exposure came really from the initiative that I took as a salesperson to create a survey form and put that in the hands of my homeowners, and to find out what they liked and what they didn't like about the houses that they had bought.
Now, Sandy worked for a bunch of different builders, or
Yeah,
how did that work?
Well, what he did, his office was in the Valley, and he was doing market studies for builders primarily in LA, San Diego, and Orange County. And he was looking for somebody to set up an office in Orange County, because so many of the prominent builders in those days were building houses in Orange County.
Got it.
So anyhow, he set me up in an office in the Dean Brothers building on Beach Boulevard way back in 1963, because I had actually started in the business in 1959. So
Nice.
I've had a long career here.
Nice.
That gave me exposure to most of the prominent builders in that early era, in the early 1960s. One day he asked me to go to the Orange County Airport and interview a young developer, and I opened the door and there was young Donald Bren. And so I was able to do the market study for the Mission Viejo community in about 1963, I would say. So
That's great.
that ended up being a relationship with Bren, because he was selling lots to outside builders, one of them being the Dean Brothers, and they had created this garden kitchen concept, which was my first understanding that even in a depression, in a down market, somebody could create a concept that would sell despite being at the bottom of the market in a very bad recession. Bren was smart enough, because the Dean Brothers had opened a project in the Diamond Bar area in East Los Angeles County, and here in 1963, when there was 200,000 building permits in the 6 Southern California counties, that had dropped by 1966 to 50,000. So we were really in a declining market. But the Dean Brothers were actually on one project in the Diamond Bar area. We were able to sell twice as fast as 8 other builders combined. In other words, the builders were selling 1 a month when he was selling 16. Each builder was selling 1 a month, or 8. And the Dean Brothers were selling 16 houses, and this was absolute in the bottom of the market at the time.
So the key differentiation was, I mean, design matters more than ever when the market's at a dip.
And they had created this garden kitchen concept, which we've talked about. What is that?
Yeah.
And and that was bringing the sliding windows down to the kitchen countertop and integrating the indoor and the outdoor living like nobody else had done it. And it was a remarkable breakthrough in design to be able to create, and it created sales. Well, Bren was smart enough to say, okay, I'm opening up the Mission Viejo community, and I need a builder that would spark traffic coming to the community and would sell fast. And so he got the Dean Brothers to be the first builders in the Mission Viejo community back when.
And at that time, Mission Viejo was really almost a tertiary location, right?
Well, yeah. There was nothing between Anaheim, Santa Ana, Tustin, Costa Mesa, where a lot of the building was going on.
So almost equivalent to the Inland Empire today,
what?
Right? I mean, almost like a distance, like you're driving to qualify.
Well, yeah, people were driving 15 to 20 miles further past the projects, or the cities like I mentioned here of Costa Mesa and Anaheim. And so Bren was smart enough to bring a builder in that would generate traffic as it did.
No, that makes sense. And I want to point that out, because oftentimes the farther out when you drive to qualify, there's this thought process that you really have to push value home building because you want to keep your costs down. But the reality is you got to give them a reason to move. And that design piece of it was so crucial. And Bren recognized that early on, as did the Dean brothers and so on. But I can't underscore that enough. Downturn or distant location, that design matters probably more than ever.
And the other thing about Bren and creating the Mission Viejo community is that he was really interested in good design. And so, in fact, later when I joined the Mission Viejo company as their marketing director, we used to really believe that at least 30% of the decision to buy in Mission Viejo happened when they crossed over the bridge and saw this early California design theme that nobody, when I say nobody, most builders and developers didn't care about at the time. They were just cared about building subdivision housing, and Bren was really interested in creating a wonderful feeling of a place, there, 15 miles out from where other development was going on. Also, about a year or two later, after Mission Viejo opened in 1965, Bren came to me and he said, "John, I can't make any money selling 7,000 square foot lots to the Dean brothers for $6,500 finished. What should I build?" So because I had been doing market studies and research in the 6 Southern California counties, I was able to identify best-selling floor plans, and I presented those to Bren, and he bought off on all 5 of them. And I called that process creative imitation. That was taking best-selling floor plans that existed in the marketplace, identifying who was going to be the most likely consumers to buy them, and then how to evolve that product.
And then realistically, you just want to do it better. You even
Yeah.
take that up a notch, right? I
Right.
mean, is that the goal?
Yeah, so design really mattered, and that was what it intrigued me, because Bren at the time was about some 10 to 20 years younger than most of the prominent builders that were in the market at that time. So
That's so great.
that, it really intrigued me, and I was really drawn to the fact that he was creating desirable places where people really wanted to live.
That's pretty exciting. So where'd you go after that? So how did that all evolve? So you worked for Bren.
Well, I'm doing work as a consultant for Bren through working with Sandy Goodkin.
Okay.
But at the same time, since I really wasn't comfortable being a public speaker, I was looking for any opportunity I could, and I was asked to be a featured speaker at a BI dinner meeting, and the subject was the changing housing market. This is 1965 now. The changing housing market and how to survive it. In fact, I had somebody that read the script of that presentation saying all you needed to do was change the dates, and it happened in every cycle here of how you figure out how to survive and how you build in a down market. But anyhow,
we might need that presentation coming up here, but hopefully not.
Well, I'll share it with you. Yeah.
Survive and thrive.
Right. So William Lyon was the president of the BIA at the time, and he actually, because I had done some work for him working out of the Dean Brothers office, he asked me to be the featured speaker. Out of that came an offer to go to work for who became the General William Lyon.
That's right. All these great icons from the past.
Yeah.
This is great.
Became an offer from Bill Lyon to come to work for him because he realized that the market had shifted, that Cinderella gingerbread houses weren't going to be, even though he was the largest volume builder in Orange County at the time, that he needed somebody to come in and redesign the products that he was building, which he was one of the largest builders in the state, both in Southern California and in Northern California. At the same time, Donald Bren offered me a job to come and be his first marketing director, but believably, I thought he was too small. And so
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, so I went to work for General Lyon for 2 years from 1965 to 1967, traveling all over the state, hiring architects and creating new product. I made some mistakes, but I would say one of the best accomplishment was when the general said to me, we got to create more affordable housing. So I hired the architect, and we counted nails to get the cost down, and it became California Classics, and there
I'm
was
familiar with those, yeah.
4,000 of those houses were sold across the state.
Wow.
So
Over what period of time?
well, I would say over a period of 10 years.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So 400 homes a year, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
so yeah, highest volume, and that was during a downtime. Excuse me. So the general was smart enough to figure out that he had to dive down to do more affordable housing, which is no different than where we are today. You know, we've got to figure out how to design new product to be more affordable, and it probably would be at moderately higher densities.
And so for those of you who don't know, so William Lyon is now owned by Taylor Morrison. Donald Bren, I'd say notably one of, if not the best developers in the country, and people come from all over the world to see a lot of the designs he's done. It's the 5th of Orange County, huge development and very notorious. I think he's ranked in the top 100 wealthiest people in the world. I mean, just not only talented, but a very striking force, I think, in our business.
Well, by 1967, the market was improving, and I had helped redesign the products for the William Lyon Company. Bren left the Mission Viejo Company in mid-67, and Phil Riley had taken over as president of the Mission Viejo Company. And Phil recognized that he needed more marketing orientation as he took over. He's an attorney, and he didn't really know that much about product and so on. So he said to me one day, well, if Don Bren, trusted you to design houses or help coordinate the design of houses like the La Paz homes, I trust you to come to work. And so I joined the Mission Viejo Company as Vice President of Marketing and Sales with product design responsibility on January 1st of 1968.
Nice.
So at the time, the Mission Viejo Company was really they had gone into the building business with La Paz Homes, and they were one of the largest volume builders in Orange County.
I was going to say, they were a developer and a builder, right?
Yeah, well, they started off to be just a
developer
that would sell lots to builders, as they did, selling to the Dean brothers. But, now was the time to put more emphasis on, by 1967 and 1968, Bren was building houses in Newport Beach that was draining people off. They were buying either in Newport Beach with a project like Harbor View Homes, or they were buying some of the move-up housing that had come to be built right out of the doorstep, or right outside Mission Viejo. So Riley was smart enough to say, we got to put more emphasis on product here, which they did. So I was able to spend the next 4 years from 1968 to 1971, 1972, running the marketing and sales as we became the largest volume home builder in Orange County at the time. And by that period of time, by 1968, the La Paz Homes product, Dean had already sold out, and the La Paz Homes product was becoming somewhat dated with the advent of more competition coming into the market area. So when you look at some of the accomplishments I think that I was able to have during that period of time, conceived a product line called Madrid Homes. And Madrid Homes, I would say that's probably my best effort in terms of identifying a market opportunity, using creative imitation again. In other words, figuring out what the best-selling houses are and then evolve them. And so I'll be darned, over 10 years, 2,700 homes were sold out of this. I mean, they changed the product some along the way, but it was still Madrid houses, Madrid España, Madrid Del Lago, Madrid, whatever. They just kept building that same product line for the next 10 years.
So that's interesting that Mission Viejo started their own builder, much like the Irvine Company does today, with Irvine Pacific. So taking those practices right there with you. Was the market good at that time in the late 60s? Or was it still a,
No,
a challenging market?
it was, extremely competitive, and that's why I say I was brought in here to try and figure out what products might be possible to create here to be able to keep the volume up. So
Sure.
it was a challenging market at the time, and we responded with this Madrid housing product.
And were there several different product lines? I know you mentioned there were different kind of series there. Was it, your segmentation and some
it
of
was
that
primarily single family detached
stuff. Yep.
at the time. So when I say Dean Homes had sold out on 7,000 square foot lots, La Paz Homes was becoming a dated product on 6,000 square foot lots. A product called El Dorado Homes, which was an affordable housing product, had been introduced and it was selling fairly well. But we needed more product diversity, but it was subdivision living with primarily single family detached lots. That reminded me here that we realized that we needed more product diversity based on consumer segmentation here. So I took my marketing department on a retreat to Palm Springs along with the representatives of the planning department, and somebody in that go away here, what are we going to do to create more volume and more diversity? Says, well, why don't we create a lake? So this was 1970, and it eventually took 6 years to 1976 for Lake Mission Viejo to open. But the idea was sparked here in 1970, realizing we needed to diversify the product. And you know very well what happened with that lake environment. They were able to introduce attached housing and product lines that never would have been able to occur if we had just continued to build subdivision housing across the horizon.
Well, it's amazing when you add some sort of an impact that creates views or a draw like that. In Southern California, the whole draw certainly is the closer to the water, the better, right? Now we're seeing, I read somewhere that there's almost 100 crystal lagoons being built throughout the country, which is a concept where you're bringing a beach-like environment to any place you want to in the country. And why? They can increase density, they can increase product segmentation, they can get, premiums are free, right? So anything you can get a view with, you're going to add value to the bottom line, which then allows you to push the density. So, and I know you've had additional experiences with bringing that same concept forward without stealing your thunder, but I just think those kinds of things can make such a difference. And I do get that California has drought issues, despite the fact I think are almost going to be completely flooded this year with all the rain we've had. But that kind of an amenity, boy, it's a game changer.
Well, you asked me, what companies that I have worked with over a period of time, and I think chronologically here.
Sure.
So by 1971, Philip Morris Corporation was negotiating to buy the Mission Viejo company. And the senior executives with the Mission Viejo company, we were all in our late 20s and early 30s, but we could see the bureaucracy of a Philip Morris coming in and buying the Mission Viejo company. So many of us left, and I was one of them that thought I might be smart enough to be able to be a general manager and run a division, which I did. So I was able to go to work over a division that had 50 people in it. The company, we had a great first year in 1972, and the management of Leadership Housing Systems wanted to send me to Florida, because they had bought Ken Bering's inventory of lots down there. But at the time, my son Tom was leading Mission Viejo High School with Mark O'Meara living next door to the Southern California State Championship. So I wasn't about to take him out of the,
rock star
out
golfing,
of being
right?
here, and go to Florida, which was a good decision. Of course, that didn't sit too well with the management of Leadership, but I was offered a job as a division president with American Housing Guild to start a division in the Orange County market area, which I did. And then that lasted until 74 when the next recession came.
And it was a big one.
And it was a big one. That was
that was the whole interest rate debacle,
interest
right?
rate went crazy, and so therefore, you know, I'm out of a job, but not for long, because the Irvine company called and said, we're in the process of introducing this new community called Woodbridge, which is of interest because they introduced a lake environment in 1976 at the same time Mission Viejo opened their lake with a
And that was led
amenity.
by the Irvine family, right, at the time? So that was pre-Bren, correct?
Yeah, Bren
Bren
Yeah,
came in
yeah,
like the early 80s, early to mid 80s, right?
Well, yeah, he actually I believe consummated the purchase of the Irvine Company in 1977,
Okay, so it was that.
78.
It was earlier than I guessed.
But Woodbridge had opened by the time already. And Ken Agate was the marketing, and I consider Ken really to be probably the premier marketing executive in our industry.
He was pretty special.
He was brilliant, genius at creating diversified housing programs, which he did with the opening of Woodbridge in 1976. Now I'm going to work for Irvine Pacific, the subsidiary of the Irvine Company, and I get involved in the projects that the Irvine Pacific is designing at the time, and one of them was Woodbridge Estates. This is where another lesson learned here, that you really can't create good design by committee.
It can be challenging. I've lived it too.
Yeah. I mean, and so one day, in fact, I went to the Rick Neiman, who ended up in Rancho Santa Margarita. I went to his office. I said, "How long we've been into preliminary design here for these projects in Woodbridge and Turtle Rock?" And he said, "Well, we've spent about $600,000 in meetings, because the design review process at Irvine Pacific was, you know, the architect present his plans, and then 10 people would sit around in a room and critique it, and nobody took the essence of what the decisions were." And so I said to the president of Irvine Pacific, "Give me a project manager, we'll go to the architect's office, and we'll sit there until we figure out that we have preliminary designs that you can approve," which we did accomplish, and I got involved in Woodbridge Estates. So the great idea that Ken had of creating a mansion concept on the main Loop Street,
Which is stunning.
in Woodbridge, was a good idea, but he was on the corporate level and couldn't implement it, so the job came to me to implement that. The architect that had been working on that plan was burned out by that time. I had to go get a different architect. We took the project manager to the architect's office, and within 2 weeks we had the design concept for Woodbridge Estates completed. And that was another example of creative imitation, because as a builder with the American Housing Guild, I'd created an attached program with detached garages at the front. And so I said, well, we could just take the structure of the townhouses, take the garages, put them in the back, and then elevate the duplexes and triplexes that were a part of a project that I had built in Anaheim, in the Anaheim Hills area. And I'll be darned, within 2 weeks we were able to consummate this thing, again using creative imitation, something that existed, and then you just elevate that structure. And to this day, people love living in this project, and I don't know how many times I've recommended across the country, you know, create this mansion estate effect for your promenade streets, because, you know, that sets the tone for the entire community here. But you can't build single-family detached houses on a loop, because you can't price them high enough. But you could certainly price right duplexes and triplexes, and it's when I check with the resale agents in Woodbridge, they say Woodbridge Estates is still one of the most popular product concepts that people want to live in.
It's beautiful.
In that community.
Woodbridge is today, you know, seeing all the master plans and being involved in so many of them, Woodbridge is my favorite master plan on the Irvine Ranch, for sure.
And it was
that
the
is one of
first
the best
time
products,
there was really,
for
I
sure.
think Ken Agate came up with 13 or 14 different product concept ideas. Well, no, actually it was the consumer segments that he came up with. And then plans were designed to target those specific buyer profiles, which if it hadn't been for the lake, it would have been all single family detached in that location.
Another Great Lake community.
Yeah,
where
and
they
the
brought that
amazing thing about it
forward.
was in 1976, over half the 13 projects in the first phase, the first quadrant of Woodbridge were attached. I mean, it was just like unheard of. But
And the water allowed for that, though, right?
Yes,
I mean, they brought
exactly.
that coastal setting in, and once again, great segmentation. I also loved, it's the first community that I can see out there, at least, you know, in this portion of the country, where they did patchwork planning. So they would do 20 of a different product type and mix it up, kind of like you used to develop communities back in the day. And it really added so much character, right? I mean, instead of doing 100 together and 100 together or 200
yeah,
together,
30,
man,
40
that makes
here.
a difference.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks so
Builders
much fun.
would just instinctively resist it, but once they knew that that was the way
They
it
got
was
the
going
next
to
phase.
be.
Yeah. Because that's what it is. They want to make sure they're locking in their business, right?
Yeah, that'll jump me to another time when I joined the I joined the Irvine Company a second time in 1986, and that's where we met. But by, I would say, 1975 and 76, when I'm with Irvine Pacific at the Irvine Company, I'm really reflecting on the fact that being a developer and a home builder on my own had bitten me by that time. Since
You were ready.
I was ready. So I started the John Martin Company, and I was actually able to survive for 12 years before the next downturn hit.
That was a tough time to go out on your own, though, right? I mean,
Well, 76 is when I really started out, and that was, Woodbridge was successful. The
Sure.
lake was now there, and so I had this run up until about 1984, and that's when the market went crazy again, and so I found myself, out on the street with, I'm being called to join the Irvine Company again, which I did, and that's where, like I say, that's where we met, and the reason Bren and the senior executives brought me in is because they had achieved entitlement for several hundred homes in Santiago Hills and Orange, Tustin Ranch in Tustin, West Park in Irvine, and the Newport Coast. And it was interesting, Bren assigned Ray Watson to make sure John knows what he's doing here because, we're putting a lot of emphasis and
those are four very
Yes.
prominent communities.
yeah, very prominent communities that we could screw up here if we didn't build the right product. So
And Ray led Woodbridge, too, right?
the what?
Ray Watson led the Woodbridge.
Yeah,
job,
that was
too,
during
right?
the
Right.
Watson
Back
era.
in the day, yeah.
Back back when, and then it became the Bren era from 1977 on. But in joining now we're now to 1986, and I've joined the Irvine Company as Vice President of Corporate Marketing.
Yes.
And the idea here was to create the diversified product programs for each one of these communities that I mentioned here. It was very soon I really realized that the home builders, and that was Lion, and that was Fieldstone, and that was Standard Pacific, and that was Aikens, knew more about the market than the Irvine Company did. And as a result, I really believe that they were out negotiating the Irvine Company, believe it or not, at that period of time.
Well, and I think you were so interactive with them in the design process. That's what I think was so interesting is to see, I mean, it was a fluid design back and forth. And I've seen so many developers in different parts of the country not do that. And I think there's a danger to that, right? I mean, because they know home building, right? And you're trying to figure out how to drive the highest value. but working together just comes up with better solutions. I mean, in the end.
Well, one of the first things that really dawned on me, in addition to the fact that the home builders knew more about the market than the Irvine company did at the time, was that there really wasn't much attention paid to how you match the builder in the product. And
Right.
in Orange,
Exactly.
at the most expensive houses were being built by William Lyon Homes, who at that time was a commodity builder and a volume builder, and immediately changed that in the next community, which was Tustin Ranch, that we put Jim Peters at the top of the pyramid, and Bramley wanted to be the next Jim Peters. Peter Perrin wanted to be the next, Jim Peters, so we put him second, and then the more commodity builders like Lyon, he would build more affordable attached housing or small lot, because they were starting to introduce court homes at the time. So anyhow, that we are now figuring out how to create a merchant builder land sale program by knowing more about the market, and then
Matching the
David
builders.
Kovac and we really research the market as what was happening, and be able to get control and then dictate to the builders, what products that they would build.
And a lot of times they made them better, right? I mean, knowing
yeah.
where they have a niche and where they do it well, it's brilliant.
Well, as we said, the builders were in control at the time. And Bren one day says, John, I want you to go to Europe, and I want you to study hillside development and coastal projects along the Mediterranean. And so with Roger Seitz, the planner, and Roland Osgood, head of development, and our wives, we took off for Europe, and we studied from Marbella all the way to Portofino, what it was like, and we came up with some ideas here. And in fact, I think you mentioned that you
I think I
probably
put together
helped me
half
put,
that book. Yeah, that's right.
put the presentation together, which I would give to any builder that was interested. And lo and behold, sitting in the front row was a builder, RGC,
One of our
and
favorites.
President Hal Lynch, taking notes. And he'd been a professor of planning at Long Beach State. And,
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no,
Oh,
and
that's neat.
he was one of those guys that could draw the plans himself. A creative,
They were so
creative
good.
genius here.
So good.
And he said to me later, he says, John, the presentation that you gave inspired us to come out with new product types, and there was a site left in West Park at the time. And so RGC went into competition with other builders, and I'll be darned, the highest land value that we had experienced up to that point was $580,000 an acre, and I'll be darned if RGC doesn't come in and more than doubling the land value with a project concept called Cortabella, and their architect was McLaren Vasquez at the time.
Well, they took the density, as I recall, up to like 21 to the acre with their court design, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that really helped them take the density up, but still get great values. And it was beautiful.
Well, it was really a breakthrough concept because,
Right.
as I remember, 16 to the acre with an average 1,600 square foot house was really as intense as was being built at the time, and it wasn't even being built in Orange County.
And it wasn't nearly as beautiful as Cortabella.
No, it was pretty ugly. I mean, there was
I didn't want to say that, but yeah.
no. I mean, there was a two-story structure.
Right.
Two levels over the garage on very sterile alleys, and part of the influence of what we learned on the European Mediterranean tour is that the court living, was acceptable, and you enhance the court, and people. I mean, there was some question will people really like to live on courts and looking across to each other? And they actually loved working on these or living on these enhanced court. And then at the
They
time,
almost feel like a piazza almost. I mean, it really does look
no,
well.
yeah, no, it was a extremely well conceived, and it was a breakthrough, as you said, from 16 to the acre to 22 to the acre, with these enhanced courts, and also what we had learned on the trip to the Mediterranean was that the colors were so beautiful in Europe compared to this pink Mediterranean monotonous style of architecture that was being built. I mean, it predominated what was being built in Santiago Hills.
Pink was a color
Tustin
there
Ranch.
for a while.
Yeah, there was a lot of pink.
Pink and orange, yep, I remember.
So it was, that trip that could have just been fun really became out to be, very valuable in how it influenced the design of homes on the Irvine Ranch from that time forward.
One little insert there too. Would you attribute the first single-family detached auto court to Hal and Jim? Because they did Los Abanicos, remember that, and they claimed it to be about 21 to the acre detached.
Yeah.
But they just basically took Portobello and pulled it apart ever so slightly, made the units about 400 square feet smaller. So they were like 900 to 1,100 square feet, and got a spectacular density. And I think it was like an open and shut case in 2 months.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen a project sell faster.
Yeah, no, it was remarkable. That was RGC ended up also being one of the builders to build the first phase of the Newport Coast. But the market was declining at the time, and Hal came up with this idea of 12 to 14 to the acre detached.
That was the Santa Lucia?
No, that was Los Abanicos, which was the 12 to 14
Right.
to the acre. And at the same time, Santa Lucia was being designed
Okay.
by RGC to be in the first phase on the Newport Coast. In fact, it turned out to be the only concept that really survived the downturn, that hit in 1990. So I don't know where I went with this, but
sorry to insert. I was just talking through all the products they invented. I would say builders are now building so many of those throughout the country, and I think a lot of that really started not only on the Irvine Ranch, but some of that spurred from your trip, some of that spurred from what Hal and Jim Berard did with RGC. There's some really interesting concepts that were born.
When the market
on
was
the Irvine
declining,
Ranch.
Hal said we got to get to higher density detached, as well as do projects like Portobello, and Portobello ended up, being very expensive to build. So it was a great concept. It actually opened up the market to building court living and have more vibrant and exciting colors, and that people would live on motor courts, both attached and detached.
But the land residual doubled per acre, so
Yeah,
it
right.
was doing something right.
Yeah.
Nice.
So anyhow, I'm with the Irvine Company at the time, and you're kind of interested in what happened on the new. So we came back with all of these ideas on what the Newport Coast could be like, but through the process, the bureaucratic process at the Irvine Company at the time, the first phase of the Newport Coast ended up being I think it was 4 or at least 5 of the 6 projects in that first phase were single family, detached, average of 4,400 square feet. Yeah, the houses, and the price $1.4 million. And this is where David Kovac in particular and my whole marketing team was saying that isn't going to fly in this first phase. And so wanting to be truthful and a contribution to the company here, in an executive retreat, I said, we're going to have some problems here in 1990.
Because where the market was, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There was just too many expensive detached houses, and so we were recommending some attached houses, partially inspired, by our trip to Europe, but also trying to get to lower price points, and it didn't fly. That was 1990, and it was about 2 or 3 years later, or 3 or 4 years later, that Taylor Woodrow stepped up and built a project called Travari and Altezza. Both were attached.
Beautiful.
The Travari was very low priced, and attracted a market of,
like
and
18-ish
particularly
to the acre.
Yeah, particularly single female buyers who just loved living on these courts, for the sense of security. And then the Altezza was a move down product that was attached, that was, attracting people that didn't want to live in a detached house anymore. And
But much lower in density, but still sold phenomenally well.
they were tremendously
to the
successful.
acre.
So it was like what we recommended that the company didn't accept at the time was proven up within 3 to 4 years after that with the introduction of the Travari and the Altezza projects.
And I think to your point, John, true to the coastal setting that you studied so much, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that coastal village, so much of it's attached, right?
Yeah.
And those are some of the most beautiful communities that I like the best on the coast.
Yeah.
Too much
Well, anyhow,
single-family detached is not my favorite, honestly.
It was time for me to move on. I had already
The battling of trying to get the coast.
Yeah.
I remember those days. Yes.
Yeah. Anyhow, here the market crashes, and and lo and behold, I get a job offer from Newhall Land and Farming to come out there because they were not selling any houses at all, and they needed to get out of the building business because the products in Valencia were dated, and so they hired me to come out, and I immediately said, well, that's a problem, figuring out how to sell the inventory of what we've had. But there would be situations, and there was a situation here where they had 2,400 of just 3 lot sizes with no segmentation at all.
Another tertiary location, just going single family detached.
Yeah,
right?
one of the first things I did was say, well, I knew Los Abanicos, which was the 12 to 14 to the acre single family detached court homes, was going to be built. So why don't we bring that out to Valencia, which we did, and so this was by 1992 or whatever, and I'll be darned if that project didn't become the fastest selling project in all of LA County at the time. And so
it's amazing what a little affordability will do for you.
Yeah. But we got 18,000 units here left to build, and we're going to be here forever here if we don't diversify the products more than that.
When you got there, John, how many homes was Newhall selling a year?
Well, it was down to practically 0 by that time. And
I want to say it was in the maybe
I mean,
low
no
twos?
more, no more than 100 at the
Oh,
time.
really?
I mean,
That low?
I would
Okay.
spend every Monday morning, with all of the senior executives when I was out there, and no sales. So we needed to figure out, what to do. And one of the ideas was, in fact, I remember Rick DeRemus,
Yeah.
home builder there.
Yes.
Warmington had walked away from 22 lots, single family detached lots. And we said, well, no builder is going to pay the price here in a down market or an uncertain market. In other words, we didn't know, how much longer that this recession was going to last, which it ended up lasting for quite a while.
Right.
So the idea was, let's put DeRemus in business on a contract to build out these 22 lots. And Rick was really a creative guy and created this media room that nobody else was doing at the time. And I'll be darned if all of a sudden, because these 22 lots had been completely written down, it was like the cash register was ringing every time we closed a house. And so it was a heck of a lot smarter to put a builder under contract, even though you might not get the closings for 9 months, than it was to wait for the market to return with builders paying the price that you would need for those kinds of lots. So it was a smart
literally
decision
they
to
bought
put.
the lot when it closed?
No, well,
Is that how it works?
they built the houses under a contract, and then
gotcha.
when the
Oh,
houses
fee-building.
sold, then that's when the cash register would ring.
Got it.
And we had some quick wins, because if the real challenge here was, what are we going to do with 18,000 acres here? The senior management at Newhall wasn't interested in going forward here if we didn't have something proof and some cash flow coming in, which we did as a result of doing the 22 lots. So that was just the start. Then there were some areas where we needed to do some affordable housing, which was attached, and so we put Rick on another contract build. In fact, he built about 6 projects out there
Nice.
under a contract, which here again, I'd spend a lot of time negotiating with Vince Meyer and Dave, this president of Pardee Homes, But I couldn't get them to pay the price for the lots, so we needed to move ahead under this contract basis, which we did.
Which is smart.
Then I think the further segmentation that we created there was, to build the little villages of attached product, as I mentioned. The Woodlands was a move-up opportunity, that Taylor Woodrow came out and built.
Beautiful
We
community.
specified a small-scale single 55-plus little village, which was called Belcaro. Since they already had a whole sea of finished lots and lots that were approved 4, 5, and 6,000 square foot lots, we needed to do, something other than that. So we created a concept called, it was Creekside, but it was the big rage was neo-traditional alley-loaded product. And so we created an array of 8 to 10 types of alley-loaded product, which when you drive through the community, because that was a complement and an alternative to building homes on the single-family detached lots. So that,
Well, and now a no maintenance, obviously, solution too.
yeah, then we started to be able to attract builders from Orange County out there because we had the product diversification. Also,
And the design got so much better, right?
yeah,
I mean, I'll never forget when that community opened. Taylor Woodrow at the time, they did such a beautiful job.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really well done.
no, we needed input from builders from Orange County because it was like the executives at Newhall Land would go on tours of the projects in Orange County, but they didn't seem to bring the ideas out there. We needed the builders who had built higher end product, and Tom Redwitz at the time, was running Taylor Woodrow, and he was looking for projects, and so this was perfect. We also brought in some attached projects to enliven the main street, because all they had was a mall out there until the time we figured out, well, we needed a main street because everybody was talking about building main streets. So we introduced that kind of housing attached to get down to lower prices. And then there were several other opportunities to diversify the product program, which we did. And one of them was, one day they asked me to, what should we build on these lots that they were intended to be lots that were at the intersection of Newhall Ranch Road and I can't remember the name of the other. It was Newhall Ranch Road. I can't remember the name of the other project.
Which one is it?
Well, it was where Bridgeport ended up.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah.
Isn't that
So-
is that McBean?
Yeah, you got it.
McBean, okay.
Yeah, I like.
That's
kinda
another
lost
one
it.
of my favorites.
Yeah.
Real quickly, Westridge and the Woodlands, those two communities, one of the things you did with Woodlands was you brought an entire new value to the whole Valencia area. So that actually allowed you to push price more. So I think it's so important that
Yeah,
not only
we
does
created a
design,
new ceiling
yeah.
here.
So
Yeah.
design not only will pull people out there and you'll get more of a draw, but it allows you more segmentation by what
Yeah.
you did.
Yeah.
And today, you've done them a favor with that, and Westridge was the second to that. And those two communities, without a doubt, are the highest value in the area. So that's huge.
And
It changes the market.
which it did.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of different choices by lifestyle segmentation as well as by product, which I think, in some of the notes you gave me that you'd realize that back when.
Oh, for sure.
But I walked out there on a misty morning here and I said, what could we do here? Because it had been designed with 4,000 square foot lots, 40 by 100, which would be the worst thing you could possibly be building.
That's like
that
the
kind
worst
of location.
module on the market.
So it just kind of came, well, Rancho Santa Margarita has their lake, Mission Viejo has their lake, Woodbridge has their lake. Why can't we just build a lake or design a lake out here?
Bring the water to this inland location.
With a walking trail. We kind of lost the walking trail with the, I think, sensitive ecological area, SEAs, where, there was a big resistance on getting into the endangered areas or anyhow. Still, the essence of that community, when you drive in there, and they've got that very stylish little rec center, gorgeous. So
It's so cute. If I lived in Valencia, that's where I would live.
yeah,
Cutest ever.
you'd live on the lake.
Oh, it's so cute.
Yeah.
It's like a little Balboa Island out in Valencia, right? Cute.
So, to fast forward here, we created an entire plan for the build out of 18,000 based on lifestyle programming. There was different types of communities that give the consumer a lot of different choices other than single family detached lots, which was what we had when I went out there in 1991.
One last question for you, because I think this is significant, and you've told me this before. What happened to the land value per acre on Bridgeport, and how did that change the marker there?
Well, I mean, they were selling land, as I remember, for about $300,000 an acre, when we first went out there, and it was in the depth of the recession. Gary Cusimano, who was the president of Newhall Land, I think he was a very effective executive in the sense that he kept every idea I brought forth here. It was, no, we can't afford that or whatever. But all it did was cause me to work harder to prove, because one of my mentors became Winston Churchill at the time, who,
I love that.
I mean, my story was there. The fact that, I mean, he saw change was necessary in 1932, I think, or 33. Nobody saw it, but he stayed at it. Don't give up. So,
Right.
My approach here was, I won't
That's
give
a
up.
good motto for you. I get that with you. Yeah. Don't give up.
Yeah, don't. Yeah.
I like
so
that.
Churchill said, don't give in, and he didn't. And then he was proved to be right. And I said, well, if Winston Churchill can save Western civilization here, maybe I can make
awesome.
I can make a small difference here in little Valencia here,
That is great.
by not giving in.
You've made a few differences amongst that career of yours, which is why I think this interview is so special. But yeah.
Well, it was, because, you asked me in some of the questions, what were your biggest challenge, in your career here? And it was really getting people to embrace change. In fact,
Right.
I even, had to retain a psychologist here saying, why is it that people resist change to the extent that they do? And he says, well, you really need to understand here that people associate change with loss, the fear of they're going to lose something. They know what they've got, and even though it may not be working, they stick with it because they don't know what the alternative is. And Gary was really good at giving me this no and not wanting to change.
You should fight and work harder.
And I've really, in fact, he said, we don't compete with the Antelope Valley.
I've had a few bosses like that in my time.
Yeah. Well,
I think we all have, for sure.
and so I went to work here. I'm figuring out, okay, over the last 10 years, what has been the balance of home sales in the Antelope Valley versus the Santa Clarita Valley, and particularly Valencia. And lo and behold, of the total sales were made, 60% were in the Antelope Valley. So people were going out to 14 to be able to get a affordable house on a detached lots. But it made sense to me, which it worked out, that you give them a small lot product like the Los Abanicos, which became the court homes in Valencia. They would take the shorter, or at least a lot of them would take the shorter route and live in a smaller detached house at 12 to 14 to the acre, rather than driving that additional distance for a 6,000 or 7,000 square foot lot in the Antelope Valley, which we did. So
Well, Valencia had great schools, great trails, great family environment, no crime. I mean, it's
and you had the diversity
as a
of product
family,
now.
You want to be there.
Yeah.
If you could afford it. It just got to the point where they couldn't afford it. But I want to toot your horn on this because, as I recall, you doubled the land residual.
Yeah.
When you got to Bridgeport.
Oh yeah,
That was huge.
That was after
That's what good product segmentation can
I
get
left
you.
Newhall in by that time. I can't remember the exact. 95, 96. So I'd been there from 91 to 95 to 96.
Think of the change. And I want to know your sales too when you left.
Well,
Annually.
the sales volume. I mean, we were selling several hundred houses a year. After
guys-
with this diversified program, you got up into 1,000 houses a year, I
Right.
think.
So 100 to 1,000, and they doubled the land residual. I mean, that's
Yeah.
impressive.
In fact, I became a consultant to the company after I left in 1995, and second or third year into that, I was asked to go up and talk with Gary in his office, and he had never ever gotten out of his chair before. And he got out of his chair, walked around, and says, "John, congratulations here, because we've sold our first lots, or first acreage at $1 million an acre." So that was the benefit
So that's three times the land value when you got there.
of creating, that kind of amenity to be able to get the diversified product program, which had occurred in Mission Viejo, Rancho Santa Margarita, and in Woodbridge. So some of the lessons learned in that other market area were applied out there with some pretty remarkable success.
And how honorable that he gave you that recognition. I mean, that's pretty great.
It was good. Well, they used to say after, they would give me the notes here, and Winston Churchill was my, mentor here at the time. I just flooded them, because as Churchill has said, the written word is more powerful. Even though he was a great orator, the written word is more important than the spoken word, because it lasts longer.
Well, and on that note, how do you make change? I mean, how do you really try to be, you want to be respectful of the people you're working with, and they're all brilliant people too. But at the same time, I mean, you've run the numbers, you've done the research, you've done all this stuff. How do you really, Churchill included,
Well, I think what we
how do you
did,
make that change?
what we did is first create a vision for what we wanted to create in the future, which involved this diversified of villages and the diversification of the lifestyle projects within that. So there was a vision of what we were going to create there, which would be affordable housing for singles, and it would be move-up housing at woodlands, and it would be the Creekside neo-traditional. I mean, there was a whole bunch of different opportunities for people to buy out there, which were a part of this vision. And I remember, asking the senior management there, let us give a presentation to the entire people that were working at the company at the time, which we did.
And see if you buy into this, and
Yeah,
and get
you
them
know,
to buy into
what
that
is going
vision.
on here, because I literally had to move the market-driven strategic planning process out of the corporate office there. And, we set it up where most of the meetings were at the consultants' offices in Orange County, because we had hired Steve Kellenberg and Don Smith that had worked with PBR at the time, and had both had worked at the Irvine Company.
Both brilliant.
Yeah. So I had, and Richard Reese, who was the planner for the Irvine Company for 15 years, and then for Tony at Rancho Mission Viejo for another 15 years.
I remember he was sort of a mentor for you.
Yeah, he was
too.
really
Yeah.
one of my mentors, and he said, "John, to make change, you need power, you need information, and you need friends." He said, "Well, you don't have any power, if you're in the hierarchy of the company, because you don't sign the checks. You don't have many friends because you're talking about doing change and people are fearing it.
That makes him nervous.
But you do have information." So that's where I just started flooding them with information and data about what was happening in the market. In fact, they said, "John, don't you ever sleep?" I was just,
He does, and I know that. I worked for him.
I was just sending out this information, which was important for them to come to their own conclusion that, hey, there is a vision here, and that we can embrace some change, and it won't be threatening, and it won't be something that we're going to lose, we're actually going to gain. And then the important part of that was the idea of respecting the differences of people that are a part of your team. In other words, you need different perspectives, and so if you then respect those differences, then you can get to trust, and you don't have to negotiate all the time and in the battle all the time. And once you get to trust, that's kind of like the next step where you don't have to negotiate, you get to harmony. And that was kind of the last step in creativity. So we had a process here of getting people on board. Now they understood what these people were doing separately, and it wasn't as threatening, because they could see, we were creating a better place to live, and people really wanted to be there.
And then so after you left Newhall. Is that when you started doing kind of consulting all over?
Well, I
different
went down
builders,
to SC
developers?
and they were intrigued with what we had done in Valencia, so I taught there for a year. And then all of a sudden the consulting work
Just
took
naturally.
off, by 1997. And so, I had a thriving consulting business based on all the experience that I had had,
Sure.
going back to Mission Viejo and the Irvine Company and Newhall Land.
And consulting is a lot of fun because you really, not only that though, but you really can pick your clients when you've done all the stuff that you've done. And the other part of it too is you're there to help them make change, right?
And I got really involved in the Urban Land Institute, and so I really realized that one of the things that turned me on was the teaching,
Yeah.
but then the consulting business was really thriving, and I was flying all over the country talking about, in fact, it was in when you asked me some big events that are important here, I was asked to fill in for Chairman Tom Lee at a Urban Land Institute presentation in Cleveland at the time, and so I stepped in for Tom, and the subject was Master Plan Communities 2010. Well, 1996, we're 15 years out here. I said, well, I know a little bit about doing planned communities because of Mission Viejo, the Irvine Ranch,
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of Valencia here. And on the panel was a senior executive for Disney Development Company building Celebration. And
I remember they came to the Irvine Company.
yeah,
at one point.
the company, had Disney, of course, that you'd expect them to, but they spent 15 years with Yankelowitz consumer studies and so on, and they came up with 4 cornerstones for building future communities, and it was education, lifelong learning, technology, a sense of place, and health and wellness. I remember them to these days. And I thought, wow, what a brilliant breakthrough this thing is to, base future community planning on cornerstones which are as relevant today as they were then.
For sure.
But of course that didn't quite, that wasn't enough for me because I knew there was more granular refinement to that. And I'll be darned, it evolved to 12 guiding principles, which we made a presentation to the planning director in the city of Las Vegas, or in the Las Vegas market area. And I'll be darned if I didn't see the planning director say, well, this is exactly what we want in our city, and you go talk to Public Works, and you talk to fire, and you talk to planning, and so on and so forth. And she was just so excited about this. And so I talked to son Tom, and I said, hey, here's my 12 guiding principles that evolved from the 4 cornerstones. He says, well, what about the community developer as grand constructor of the process, and what about product diversification, so on and so on. So it became 33 guiding principles to creating communities in the 21st century, which we were able to use as a checklist in some of the work we did across the country.
I remember that list. We're actually going to put that at the end of this podcast, so you'll have access to some of the things that John's talking to.
Well, I hope you have a photo of the garden kitchen,
I do.
So people know what that is.
We'll
because
put
that
some
was
of that
really,
in there too.
the impression that it put on me of how one builder with one project can sell twice as fast as 8 other builders in the same market area in a down market where permits are going from 200,000 to 50,000 over a period of 3 years. That idea, our challenge now as we go through a down market is, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to create more affordable product solutions. And I think there's just going to be more multi-generational housing, of people coming together to live under one roof. And I think you and I both agree that our best source of information is going out and talking to resale brokers and to talk to new home sales agents, because they're listening to people.
Well, and where you started. I mean, talk to the people that are going to live in these homes. What do they want? What's important to them? What are we trying to solve for? Yeah. The resale agents will tell you what's selling. The customer will tell you why they'd move. Mm-hmm. And that's such a big part of it, yeah. Which I love that's the foundation of where you started. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Okay. We're going to go back a little bit farther in your life, sort of from the very beginning. Who were your mentors growing up? Who really, you're one of the hardest working people, if not the hardest working person I know in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. quite frankly, I think a lot of my work ethic came from working for you and David, for sure. And, tell me a little bit about that, or share that with the audience too. I mean, I know, very early on, you've had that kind of fire, I think, from a young John Martin.
Well, I was born in 1934. This is a long time ago. And when you look back on the economy crashing in 1929, by 4 or 5 years later here, we're really at the bottom of the market when I'm born. And then 1939, England, comes to the support of Poland, and the war has started. 1941, Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor, and by 1945, 46, I'm 10 to 11 years old, and all of this is going on.
What a crazy time to be growing up.
Yeah, and I remember, I don't know what drew me to it, but I'd get on the bus as an 11-year-old, and I'd drive down to the Pike in Long Beach, and I'd watch newsreels of the war.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I mean, that's, it's part of my fascination with World War II is what those impressions were. But it was a very insecure period.
Sure.
My dad, because he had 2 kids, I don't know what his jobs were, and I hardly ever saw him.
But he worked hard.
And
that was a tough time to make it on anything.
Yeah. And so we've got all of these influences here of what's going on, down economy, didn't know what my dad was doing, and then he passed away at 43, and I'm 13 years old.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
I remember the night he died, we were saying, well, what's going to happen to us? So it was my sister and me, and so you talk about a driver here,
the fire's lit.
It was by fear. I was driven to do what I was doing, but you asked me did I have any mentors. I had no mentors whatsoever. I had no idea what the business world was about. I had no idea what I wanted to be unless I was an athlete. And so I couldn't hit a curveball, and I didn't like getting hit in football, so I ruled those out.
Smart.
But then I did find I was a fast runner, and I'll be darned, I had the 3rd fastest time in the entire city of Los Angeles in the quarter mile. And the track coach at UCLA, saw my time and helped facilitate me to get into UCLA. So I'm running fast, and it is paying off here because it's helping me, get into UCLA at this very early. Well, I'm only 17 at the time, but anyhow. So
that's fantastic. I actually love the fact, though, that you recognize that it literally going through all of the stuff that you went through, difficult times, I think adversity sometimes it makes people. Mm-hmm. And I think that fire to a large degree is what lit the fire in you. Yeah. It was survival, but it also was, you're going 1,000,000 miles a minute to make it work.
Yeah.
And the running probably helped with all of that too, I might add.
My only claim to fame is I ran freshman track out there at UCLA, and I took second to a guy that actually won 2 gold medals in the Olympic Games in Tokyo.
Way.
Yeah. But I mean, He beat me from here to the end of the block.
You didn't have to share that. Yeah. We can cut that out of the podcast. No. That's awesome. That is really cool.
I'd say those very fear-driven environment that I was in my early youth, I think motivated me. And then I'm out at UCLA, and my mother goes to work, and she'd never worked in her life before. We don't have much money. I got to quit college twice, which I did. But I went down, you asked me some of these crazy jobs that I had, when I'm going down to work on assembly lines and unloading boxcars 10 hours a week. And, what occurred to me was there's a lot of people that are stuck in those kind of jobs for their entire life. And so I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to graduate, and I'm not going to have to be in that kind of situation. Because one of the jobs, at General Motors is, we were undercoating cars, and the job was so bad that the guy would stumble around in his undercoating the cars here. And but I got the routine down, And I got to do something with this boring, repetitious job here. So somehow I picked up 3 vocabulary books, and I would put the vocabulary books up on a shelf here, and I'd go through my routine, and I'd memorize these books. And so I memorized 3 vocabulary books while I was working there. You know, on the assembly line, I go back to school, and I get pretty much straight A's because I can talk better and I can write better.
Oh, that's
and
you're a great writer. A great
well,
writer.
thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I don't consider myself to be, but I write a lot.
Oh, you're a great writer.
Okay.
You and David are both like really good writers.
Well, thank you.
Yes. I remember you telling me the story about working for General Motors, and you're like, the guy would, like, every time he'd spray, I'd get hit with the sprayer.
Yeah, I had to go into the, into the job half an hour early to be able to put the tape across here, so all you could see was my eyes. And then it would, after the job was over at the end of the day, it would take me another hour or so to get all the greasy stuff off me. So, I mean, a lot of people work on those kinds of jobs their entire life here, so I was tremendously motivated.
That's hysterical.
And then fill the time with a learning experience here. So I turned this really unfortunate situation here, and I go back and then I graduate. And then by that time, that's 1958, and I'm married and have 2 kids. So that's given me additional thing. And I knew nobody in the real estate business, whatsoever. But I'm out looking for a house. We could buy a house in the San Gabriel Valley, or we can, buy in the San Fernando Valley or the South Bay or Orange County. So we said, well, Orange County is where we're going to go, and I can't qualify because I'm making $300 a month here as a claims adjuster for an insurance company. But I had a broker's license coming out of UCLA, and I'll be darned if the broker who had just gotten a contract with Lusk to sell his houses says, well, why don't you go to work for me and put your plans across the hood of your car and take names, which I was very happy to do. And that was first day was on May 15th of 1959.
I love that you're buying a house and the guy recruits you to sell.
And he recruits me to sell. So I go to work as a salesperson. And then that's when to a little recap there, I realized sales represents the producer. You're given something and you sell it, and marketing represents the consumer. You find out what they want and you design to it, and you don't have to be a good salesperson. So that was my first lesson. And then, taking the initiative to do a survey of my buyers, called the Green Hills Report, and John Lusk is saying, I got this guy that does market studies. Well, I've done one. At that point in time, but that changed the entire trajectory of my career here to get into research and marketing, which I did, and then that led to, a lot of significant jobs here that I've had in my career. It's kind of fun now to thank you for this opportunity. It's kind of.
I love it.
Yeah, I can.
Well, I think that the one thing that I have heard throughout all of your work experiences, you always did more than what they asked you to do.
That's
you always
point.
really push to like, what's the right thing, and I may not have the tools here, but I got to go find them or create them.
Well, and that's exactly
a key ingredient.
That's exactly what happened, working for Lusk there, because I saw this need to know more information, and on my own initiative did this Green Hills report, and that's what John Lusk would say, I got this guy to all of his bankers that does market studies, and then that led to Sandy Goodkin hired me, and that led to meeting Don Bren, and that led to being the marketing director of the Mission Viejo company. Yeah, it really, so any of the teaching I do, in fact, you had a question there, what would you tell young talent? I said, do more than your job description, do work outside of that and take the initiative to do things. If you see a need, fulfill it.
So I'm going to go through a couple of quick questions for you. Best role, best job you had. Everything we just talked about, best role.
Well, I think working with Bren there's more than just one though.
You got to pick one. I'm only giving you one. Pick one. Best role.
Well, I think putting together the market-driven strategic planning team and repositioning Newhall based on all the experience that I had before.
Love it.
To how you program 18,000 units, because it wasn't here we're talking about concluding that in 1995. By 2003, Lennar and LNR step up and pay $980 million because the market had been proven by that time. And that was the remaining inventory in Valencia, and also the 20,000 plus units are now being developed around Magic Mountain at the time. So I'd say taking...
Was that
you know,
land source? Was that the land source still?
No.
Doesn't matter. Go ahead.
So I think, you know, that's
It's a new
probably
mall.
a crowning achievement, because it was a culmination of everything that I had learned, you know, up until that point. And then the market is proven up and somebody pays a horrendous price, you know, for that inventory. So I'd say that's probably number one.
Well, and huge success. I mean, huge success. You know, 100 to 1,000, and you doubled the land residual. Great job. Biggest challenge in your career?
Well, the biggest challenge is getting people to embrace change. No question about it.
No question.
Fighting bureaucrats that don't want to change because they're threatened. They don't know what the, you know, they fear that there's a loss there, or they might be losing more than they're about to gain. So I'd say challenging the resistance to change and doing something about it in my career is probably number one.
Favorite boss? I know this is a hard one to answer, especially when you're being recorded.
Well, working for or working at, you know, I wouldn't necessarily consider that person that would influence me the most to be my former boss. But I'm working.
You're working for or working with? You can pick either.
I'm working in threes here. You know, I got Donald Bren, Tony Moiso, and Larry Webb. I think are the three ones that I have worked with, you know, more than
with
four.
and or for, but
Yeah.
Three amazing men
Yeah.
for sure. I want to ask you a couple personal things.
Yeah.
Favorite pastime? What do you and Linda do when you're thinking, what should I do with my day? Favorite thing to do?
Well, we're in a new era here, you
I
know,
know.
of retiring or trying to retire. You know, I read a lot,
I know.
and I'm particularly fascinated with the history of World War II. So I'm spending time there. I decided I really wanted to be good at pickleball, and
I love that.
yeah.
Me too.
And so
I want to play
I'm
pickleball with
taking
you.
training, you know, to be a good
You'll probably beat me.
pickleball player. I love riding my bike, and then we spend a lot of time in our place in Idaho here, up in Ponderosa Park, you know, on our bike. My favorite, I don't know, you asked me about my favorite sport, I think, and it's watching
Yes.
college football. You know, I played a little football myself. I wasn't that good. But it's those are kind of like gladiators here, and I, you know, really respect the talent and the enthusiasm of, you know, the college environment and college football.
I love football too. Favorite book?
Well, I read all of the works by Winston Churchill, and then I read.
What's a favorite Winston Churchill book? I've heard you and David talk about that forever. Like,
Well-
Mollie, you should read this one. What's the book?
Well, look up William Manchester's books on
Okay.
Churchill, and
Okay.
then he did about 3 of them, you know, Paths of Glory and, you know, whatever. It just fascinates me, you know.
By the next time we meet, I'm going to read that book.
Yeah, look up William Manchester's books on Winston Churchill, and I'd say I'll reread them, and it was good for me because David, I think, introduced me back to Winston Churchill at the time, and it helped me understand human nature and why I had these challenges. That, I mean, if by 1932 nobody's believing that Hitler's a bad guy except Churchill, you know, then I'm aware here that people are resistant to change. They want the status quo, and they fear what the loss might be.
And you can't believe just the words. You've got to follow
Yeah,
the action.
yeah.
It's more than words. Who's doing it right? Give me 2 or 3 builders, 2 or 3 master plan developers. And actually, I'm going to corner you on this one. 2 or 3 builders, 1 master plan developer.
Well, the master plan developer, I have a lot of respect for what the Irvine Company has done with their
Sure.
villages and so on and so forth.
Okay, you
But-
get two. What's the second one?
Well, the number one, I think, is Ladera Ranch.
Nice.
Yeah.
Rancho Mission Viejo today or Ladera Ranch completed?
No, Ladera Ranch, what they did back then,
I love it
and
too.
yeah,
I love it
Tony
too.
Moiso enabling Paul Johnson and his team to put together that process, I think, is just off the chart. I mean, that is chapter and verse on how you create a builder program, and
It's beautifully done. The
yeah.
villages, the whole. I
no,
totally agree.
it's so well thought out, and how they figured out their village development phasing thing, where they would open a new village every year or every 18 months and so on. Now, I'd rank Ladera Ranch with their emphasis on the design guidelines and the implementation of the builders. They would put the builders in competition with each other, and they'd actually raise the bar on each other. So I'd say
And they
that's
collaborated with them through the design process, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just come back and tell us what you're going to do. It was let's meet and let's meet again and let's meet again to make sure we're doing this in collaboration. Super neat.
yeah.
What about builders? Give me your top three.
Lennar, Shea, and Toll.
Why?
I would say that well, I think what Toll did was just absolutely remarkable in how they designed these plans, with their entertaining areas and their drama at the entrance and so on. I think it's pretty remarkable. Shea with, Howard influence here. I mean,
My faves,
yeah. They're really on the cutting edge, and then and the diversification that they have of doing 55 plus under the Trilogy brand and their other projects where they really diversify the product program.
I think they're one of the most consistently good builders too.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're very thoughtful about the process, everything. I agree with. I like your top three.
And Lennar, I'm intrigued because I had something to do with it, which was, I called Jeff Roos the other day and I said, what has been the influence of this next gen and how many? He says, we think we've built about 17,000 more houses because of that concept. And it really, I had something to do with that
You were so influential
in the
that.
sense. Yeah, because I had been working for John Lang Homes on a problem project in Huntington Beach, and Jody Clegg, who's,
Yeah.
here again, I'm going to the top resale agent. She says, John, there's just two things you need to understand here if you're going to ask the question, what's happening in the market. And that's the fact that there's a lot of these baby boomers whose kids are grown and they want to downsize, but they don't have anything to downsize to. And the other thing is the number of generations coming together to live under one roof, multi-generational housing. So I said, oh, that's interesting. So I did a little study of that, and I found a Coldwell Banker study that their agents were saying, 30% of them were saying, we are experiencing more people wanting to buy a house that has accommodations for more than one generation, and they were coming together for financial reasons and for support of maybe grandma or whatever. There's a lot of reasons for their coming together, and that's why I think that trend will continue more.
The numbers are even bigger today, John. It's closer to. It's
Well, and they're going to grow
36%
even
today.
more, because the baby boomers are getting older and they're living longer.
Yep.
And
Well, it's becoming less affordable.
somebody, I guess it was a architect in the Phoenix market area, came up with this idea, presented it to the division president in Lennar locally in that market. They phoned Roos, and Roos ran down the hall to Tom Martin and says, well, Dad's been working on this thing for a couple years now, figuring out what that would be. And so they set up a meeting with John Jaffe and Roos and Tom. And so I started into the presentation about where this is going, and Roos and Jaffe is decisive. He says, we're going to do that. And within 3 months, they had a model, multi-generational model home already built in the Phoenix market area. So the fact that Lennar jumped on this and is on the cutting edge of doing something that on a trend that is increasing, I would rank as my third.
Love it. And I believe it's a third of their sales in Phoenix too,
Is it?
correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I expect more and more builders to be able to do that, and we'll figure out more product solutions, which will combine, in fact, we even won an award at the Pacific Coast Builders Conference coming up with a concept in 5,000 square feet here, where you had a place for the aging baby boomer, single, say with her own access, and then you had a place for the daughter that is going through a divorce with 2 kids and needs a fresh start, and then you had a place with an elevator upstairs, for the
For grandma.
yeah, well, no, grandma's on the lower floor.
Okay.
Yeah, and you have a place upstairs for the baby boomer that's accessible by an elevator, and then you had another little village or villa over here for the student that has graduated but can't launch and needs to build at home. So I mean, that concept hadn't been built yet, but I think we'll come up with those kinds of solutions here for accommodating multi-generations living under one roof.
Azure is sort of that way in Rancho Mission Viejo. They had the little multi-gen, but you had to buy it separate. But it was another very dense program, but very similar to what you're saying. Okay, so we're down to the final stretch here. Top leaders and legends and why. And I'm going to start. I think we talked about Churchill, but Churchill was one of your top leaders and legends. Why? And obviously, his ability to make change, but also fight for change, right?
Yeah.
Anything other than that for Churchill?
No, I think Churchill was the fact that, he looked into the future, and he was in this.
But he fought for it too. I mean,
he stayed
that's what made him great.
Yeah, no, and he was.
In an understated way, he fought for it, right? I mean,
Well, he just kept, he
pushing.
had the courage to be able to go before the House of Commons here and say, this is bad news coming up here with Churchill, and then that his never give in, has been kind of inspirational to me when, if I think I know what's happening in the future, I'm going to fight to have it be accepted and implemented.
Pick 2 or 3 other leaders you've worked for and tell me why. What top reasons they're inspirational to you?
Well, that's where Donald Bren and Tony Moiso come to the top of my consciousness here. Bren, very disciplined, really believes that good design creates value.
And a really good eye.
Yeah, and right. I mean, when I say the word picky, he just, details are extremely important. And that intrigued me. And with what he did at Mission Viejo to start that, and then what he's done ever since is pretty remarkable. And Tony, he learned on the job early on, because I think one of the reasons Bren was accepted to be the first president of the Mission Viejo company and community was that he said, Tony, when you get out of the Army here, you've got a job. And so Tony learned on the job, and then when Philip Morris came in, then he really put his emphasis on what you're going to do on Rancho Santa Margarita lands, which still was to be a Rancho Santa Margarita, Ladera Ranch, and the build out of the rest of the holdings there. But Tony is just a quality person. I mean, he still writes little handwritten notes, which is just absolutely pretty remarkable. His people love him. He's
adore him.
He's just inspirational. So I would rank, Bren in the industry, Bren and Moiso at the top of the list, along with Larry Webb, who is so charismatic, and you really trust him and believe that what he says is what he believes.
Well, and Larry and Tony, I don't know Tony like you do, but certainly Larry, there's just such a genuine humanity thing there. He's just so, he really cares. And I would say that's what I've always heard about Tony Moiso too. Like, he doesn't say it, he means it. Yeah. Right? Where you didn't quite get that warm fuzzy from Don for sure, but he certainly cared about the land and what happened to it, and built some amazing and very special places. So, I mean, what a legacy you've left. Look at all the stuff that you've changed. I mean, you have a lot to be proud of.
It's been a good career.
It's It's been a great career.
Yeah. So I'm going to learn how to play pickleball.
I'm in
Yeah.
if you want to if you know,
And,
Linda, I know is a great partner, and you've got a slew of children too. But yeah, I'm your person. I have more friends that are playing pickleball now.
Yeah.
It's
I
hysterical.
just got to realize my limitations here. I decided that I was going to join the bike club where our place in the desert here.
Yeah.
And so I showed up one morning and there was 50 bikers there with their yellow outfits and their helmets and their tight pants.
garb.
And so on and so forth. And they didn't tell me where we're going.
The padded
here.
pants.
Yeah. And they took off, and then this string of bikers, and I'm pedaling like crazy, and I've even got the assist on the bike, and I can't keep up. I miss the signal, and I'm lost out in the middle of nowhere. And then I just realized it's too dangerous for an older guy like me to be riding his bike on the. So now we're within our community. We've got a 2-mile loop, and so I get a lot of bike riding in within the community. So I realize my limitations here, but you know, shit, I'm 88 years old here, so I could keep going.
You know, I have to add as we conclude here that John's secret weapon is his wife, Linda.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And she does have like these, I just want to know what's in the secret juices and what vitamins you're taking all the time, because I keep getting older and you just stay the same. I can't figure it out. But John, I love you. I just can't thank you enough for doing this. And,
My pleasure.
And I just, you've been a mentor to me and a friend, and I can't tell you how many other people would say the same about you. So thank you for joining us. Yes, I love you.
Thank you again for joining us. This is Mollie Carmichael, and I hope you enjoyed this series. Please hit like if you liked today's broadcast, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more from the best and the brightest in our industry. Take care, everyone, and I hope you join us again next time.